My name is Brenton and I am a student at the University of Portsmouth. I'm Young Entrepreneur of the Year 2022 and I run a creative production agency called Firefly Media. So I was born in Boston and I went to Boston Primary and then went to the Bourne in Southbourne. I was quite like a shy kid, to be honest. I wasn't very social. I was an only child. I wasn't too into sports either. But I was quite into like YouTube and stuff like that. I was quite nerdy, to be honest. One of the key things that actually sort of led me into video and filmmaking in general was actually one of the teachers at Bourne. So he was actually an RE teacher. He could tell I struggled quite a lot at school and that I was quite shy and I used to hate sports days and I was, pitch last or whatever. But he actually one day offered me to like film the sports day instead of taking part and that was like when I first picked up a camera. And then from there I made like YouTube videos because that was, I feel like this generation, every young kid wants to be a YouTuber, and so that's sort of how I got into video editing and like that. I did go to Try College. I did A-levels in film, photography and media. I didn't pass, I don't think I passed any of them. I might have passed media, but yeah, I just didn't do very well. I'm not very academic. I didn't do great in secondary school. I just sort of scraped like C's, and then when I came to college, I did a BTEC in graphic design, and thought that was the route I was going to go down. But I did quite well in that in the end. I got distinction because that's a bit more like hands-on learning instead of I've never been too good at writing. But then went to uni and did digital media there, and that's sort of where I started everything. The biggest challenges of getting to where I am now would be the business side of things. Especially when you're going into freelance, there is such a learning curve because it's like, you have this like I'm so passionate about making videos and it's like what I love to do and I can do it all day. It's like, it's turning that into a business is really difficult because it's that you have to wear so many hats basically. Like you're head of sales, you're doing all your own marketing, you have to manage your social media, and then it's learning the finances. And I think, I've never really had issues with the bumps in the road when it comes to filmmaking and photography, because they're the things where I'm like, this is just gonna make me better at what I do. But then when it comes to the bumps in the road, when it comes to like business and the learning curves, they're a lot harder to get around. So yeah, when I finished college, I was actually wanting to get into like motion graphics because I applied for a few apprenticeships in marketing, and then I did like a work experience at a marketing agency, and I was getting into like gym quite a lot at that time as well, and like very much like personal development and stuff like that. And then I met a guy who was an animator there, who I kind of had this vision in my head of what all like animators would look like, and I was like, that's not me, And then I met this like really cool guy who was doing a creative job and on good money, and I was like, oh, it kind of like opened my eyes that you can do something creative. When I thought of doing creative jobs, I always imagined like this like starving artist sort of thing, where it's like you can try, but it's like 1% of people actually make it but there's so many jobs in it. Yeah, the first lockdown, I bought my first camera, my first mirrorless camera, and I just spent all my student loan on it because I had some free time, and I thought, at the time I only thought that the lockdowns were going to be about a month long, so I was like, I've got a month to like learn how to use the camera, and then when all the businesses start reopening again, I'll just go around and offer them all like a free reopening video. And so it was after I did my first video was for a coffee shop, and I just like that was it, like I fell in love with it, I've got to say, filming it, like being on set, it definitely is, because I feel like it's just the people you meet is incredible, and just the experience in itself, outside of work, when people talk about say if you were to go to a concert and you were to film it on your phone, and people say, oh, you're not taking it in, you know, because you're filming it on your phone. When, well, I feel like it's quite the opposite of that when it comes to work. Like, I feel like because I have the camera, it takes me to these awesome places. Like, I never really saw myself as like an artistic person, but then like later down the line, the more I shoot, and the more like moments that I get to experience, and I get to sort of like sculpt them into something even cooler for like other people to enjoy. And so I feel like when you're shooting, you're kind of experiencing that moment. And I love that, but I also love pre-production, and that's like making storyboards and mood boards, which I never used to do, but the pre-production is so important because the shoot is kind of like shambles without it. Like, if you know exactly how you're gonna shoot it and how you're gonna edit it, it like cuts everything in half, because then when you go into editing as well, it's like you're not trying to think about where the shot's gonna go, because you already know, and you just like putting them in place like Lego. I get quite attached to the projects that I do, especially if I put a lot of time into planning them. Like the shoot I did with Volvo, I was like I've been very emotionally attached to that, because I've spent like 3 days planning it. I've changed it a few times, and like I've spent just hours at my desk just planning it, like making sure it all works. When I do that, and then I send it to the client, and they I don't mind making changes, but when they want to make changes and I suggest that it would kind of like break down the story that we were originally trying to tell, I find that quite frustrating. But oftentimes, with a good explanation of why that's probably not the best idea and other alternatives that will sort of meet the reasons why they're trying to change, that usually works. But yeah, I don't like changing. Like I have a vision in my head, so when I present it to the client and they're like, yeah, the music doesn't really fit with our brand, that's frustrating, because it's, you know. So that happened because one of my lecturers basically emailed me and said that I should go for it. And at the time, back then, I was basically doing a 9 to 5 at my university library, because I was just like all over Farfly at the time and I was loving it. And I would just spend all my time there. And I remember just sitting in the library and I got that email and I was like, yeah, I didn't really understand like quite the scope of like how big it was going to be or whatever. But yeah, so I applied for it. It took like an hour. I had another Zoom call where they basically interviewed me and asked me about like, sort of just asked about who I was and like what my goals were. And yeah, and then next thing I know, I'm getting an email from them saying, you're nominated for the award. You should come down. And there was like the tickets were like £100 a person, so I ended up getting my parents' ticket and everyone else's ticket. And then yeah, it was a really cool event. It was like this big black tie event. There was loads of people there. There was another guy who was also nominated for the award. And then I won it. I went up on stage. It was just like so surreal, because it was just, especially back then, it was like everything I'd been doing from my bedroom. Like it was just really weird that there was like this big long speech about me afterwards, and it was just like, wow, that's actually like a real thing. And yeah, I had an interview with the reporters, and then just had a great time. And like a lot of my clients were there too, that I'd worked with from Portsmouth, and they were up for winning other awards, and so it was really nice to just like, I don't know, it was a really like special day.